I'm Tom Holland, and this is Field Target Tech. Last week we tore my Marauder apart. We disassembled it totally, and this week it's time to put it back together again. So we're going to go to the workbench in a little bit. I apologize for the camera shaking around. I'm just holding it because I didn't want to put it on the mount or anything. After we put the gun back together, we're going to go to the range for a little bit, and we'll see what happens. I'm going to be editing a lot of the video because you have some speed bumps while you install all these parts. And I just want it to be speedy so you guys know what to do, what process to do in it. If I'm held up a little bit, I'll just fast forward it, and you'll get the idea, because some of the parts they're not difficult, but they're a little bit tricky to install properly, and you just have to take your time and be careful. So I don't want to take all that time up on the video. So let's go to the workbench and put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Okay guys, here we are. All the parts I have pretty much laid out, all my Allen keys and everything. There's a few things I did to this before we even got started. First of all, everything's been cleaned off, everything's been honed. I've lubed all the O-rings on everything that has to be lubed, except for one thing, because I wanted to show that process. What I have here is parts list. This is from Archer Air Guns, which has a 2x Marauder seal kit, and it has transfer port, which are these over here, transfer port, washers for your barrels. It has every washer that you need to seal the Marauder up twice. So that's a good thing to have. And that particular kit comes with this little device here, which is the little tool that he has to cover this gauge block for when you're sliding the valve in, it doesn't destroy the valve. So the seals on the valve. So that's a good thing, and we're going to be using that in a little bit. Now, some preliminary things that I have already done with this before you guys got before I got on camera with you guys. Like I said, everything's been lubed and greased up. What I did was, in part of my tuning process, we're going to have eventually the valve with the hammer. Let me get this out of here for now. The valve and the hammer in the back. So when you cock the gun, this comes back, pull the trigger, the sear disengages this, and whacks the hammer. And the hammer whacks the valve. Now, being that this has no adjustment on it, these two parts have no adjustment from Hill Air Guns. These are non-adjustable, as the Marauder parts originally were. So the only thing that we can adjust is basically the regulator and your hammer spring. And the hammer spring judges on how much tension is put onto the hammer, forward or back, and it dictates how hard the hammer hits the valve. What I have done with this is I have coated the threads of the piece inside with a very, very large amount of Teflon. So when this Allen key is inserted in here and it is turned, it is very, very difficult to turn it, as you can see, because we don't want this thing moving, because it's one of the few adjustments that we can actually make on the gun. All the other adjustments for these two parts have been taken out. So I put this about halfway, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the regulator with a simple little tool that I made, which I'll show you guys when we put the regulator in, that will stay onto the regulator, so I don't have to take the regulator out at the range every time I want to adjust this regulator. I can just take this end cap off the end, adjust it higher or lower, and put this end cap back onto the gun without having to take the gauge out, the regulator. I can adjust it on the fly, so to speak. So what we're going to do first is we're going to make sure that we have all our parts together, and we have our bin here with all of our screws. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to reinstall the valve. So the valve is going to go in first. And normally what is done is we're going to, most builders say to put it in through the rear. I don't like putting it in through the rear because there's a lot of holes and stuff that can eat up this O-ring. So I like installing the valve from the front of the gun. Now these very, very fine threads that are inside of here, these have all been cleaned off and everything. I've taken in the past a very, very, very fine piece of sandpaper, probably 2000 grit, wet or dry, and I've lightly gone over those threads just to take the sharpness away just a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this valve and we're going to line everything up. You want it as lined up as you can so you don't have to spin this valve once it's inserted inside the tube. So inside the tube, let's see, it's this way. So this is where the transfer port would go, which is this piece, and that's where the barrel sits on the breech. So what we're going to do is we're going to slide this in so this transfer port lines up with that, and these two holes are threaded, and that holds the breech onto this main tube. There's not a lot of parts on this gun to really deal with. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take this and keep it the same direction. We're going to go nice and easy past those threads. You don't want to damage them, and it's now past the threads. So now what we can do is we can take our PVC ramrod here and force the valve, very tight fit because there's a lot of pressure on it, doing that. So we're going to work the valve towards the back. And in this case, we will not need the something got stuck in it here. Just gonna extract it. We will not need the Archer tool for this because we're not going to be bringing. Actually, no, we will. We're going to use the Archer tool for this because we're going to be bringing the O-ring past the gauge where the regulator and the pressure gauge go into it. So we're going to put this in here until this passes that particular part. And here comes the O-ring now. So I'm just going to get right past it, and we're past it. And as you've noticed, it went rather easily. I have chamfered the inside of almost all of these holes, so whatever O-ring goes past it on this particular tube will not be damaged. So now we're going to just go a little bit more here. And we're going to line up the screw holes in the back. A little too far. That's okay. Not the end of the world. This is the trickiest part of the entire installation. Is getting this properly all lined up. It's a bit on the tough side. Okay. Now, you can see where they're almost lined up, but not quite. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a nice rounded, larger piece here. You know what? I'm going to take the PVC pipe and do it. this is like a hit or miss thing. This is a very tricky part of it. This is the hardest part. Oh, here we go. And as you can see, what we want to do, we'll put the Archer tool off to the side. We can fine tune this and get this right where we need it to be. And you have to swirl it back and forth a little and twist it. And push it, and it's all lined up right now. So now that's where your transfer port would go. And now what we're going to do is we're going to put the screws from, take all our parts out. We're going to take the screws, which is these three right here, and we're going to put them into the valve. And that holds the valve in. And I would recommend putting everything in by hand before you tighten it up with an Allen key, because you do not want to cross any of these screws. And there's three of these holding this valve in. So you want to do that. Pick the right size Allen key, which this is not. And run them into the valve. Do them all nice hand tight first, just nice and loose. Like so. And we'll give them a little, you don't have to go crazy with these, it's just being held into place. So that valve is in. So that means everything is lined up, all of the other ports and the holes. So now what we're going to do, you take the hammer. Now the inside of all of this, as something goes falling over, has been all polished and everything. And that's the hammer striking the valve. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this screw back in. Tighten this down, again, using the proper Allen key. And that's your hammer. Now this piece is in the back, and that's your preload that you're going to have on the hammer. So, which isn't a whole big deal, but it's going to have some preload. I do have an aftermarket hill spring that, in case this gives me too much power, even with my adjustment back out, I could put this spring in and get a lesser feet per second out of it. So, I'm going to take the trigger mechanism, push this in, and here's where the trigger mechanism bolts on. Now, the sear, as you see here, engages in this slot, and that engages on the hammer. So, we're going to take this, we're going to leave this in, and what we're going to do, put that over it like that. I'm going to take two of these screws, and we're going to just get them started. We're not going to make them tight, we're not going to wrench them down. We just want these, again, it's a little tricky to get them going. And just do them hand tight, just so it's still loose. You got a little bit of play in it, so you can get this last screw in. So we take this last screw, drop it in, and that basically holds the end cap on, just like that. Okay. So now we can take these and make these tight, and give a little pressure to the end cap here, and we'll hold that down. And that's it. The trigger mechanism is in. And we're gonna, okay guys, And what we're going to do is, now that we got the trigger mechanism in, we're going to put this aside for a second. We're just going to put it over here. And we're going to take our, oops, save the regulator. We're going to take our nice new Crosman barrel, which I have honed actually, and we're going to install this into the breech. This is the next step. As you can see, there's an extra step on here because this barrel is a dual-use barrel for some of the newer breeches that are out there, like a Gen 2 or a Gen 3, because those breeches are a little bit longer and you have an extra screw. That's one of the plus sides of a Gen 2, but like I said, I prefer a Gen 1 due to the ease of getting to the barrel to clean and service it. So what we're going to do, you have to find the flats and make sure that the barrel is sitting on a flat. Wrench that down pretty righteously. And when we look at the bottom, you can see the hole where the transfer port goes. Now, what we're going to do is we also have a Hill aftermarket transfer port. And I got a couple brand new O-rings that we're going to install in this. So what we're going to do is no O-ring in that. I have removed that, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to take a very, very light coat of grease. You don't need a lot. This is Super Lube synthetic grease. This is the grease that is supplied with Steyrs and some other brand air guns. It's an excellent lube. It does not detonate. And we're going to just get some grease on that. And what we'll do is we'll put this on one side of the transfer port. And again, this is a Hill high flow transfer port. And we'll put this into the breech. And that sits right into the slot in the barrel. So I'm going to take the remaining grease on my hands and put this aside. And we want to very carefully, there we go. Once you get them started by hand, they go relatively easy. And you just want to snug these up again so you can have a little bit of movement to get the rear screw in. I wish. Okay, so that's in. This is on. Sorry if I'm losing the camera. I put the camera a little bit closer so you guys can see a lot more of the details than I'm doing here. So we wrench that in, and we are good to go. And that's basically all there is to that. So now what we're going to do is we are going to reinstall the bolt. Bolt goes in. It's a nice fit. You can feel the resistance of the O-ring in the barrel. Make sure you guys have the O-ring in that barrel. Trying to get that O-ring in after it's in the breech and on the gun is a winner. So you might not want to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to close the bolt. lay this down like this. This screw, as I said in the past, has a sleeve on it. You do not want to lose this inside the breech. If you do, this is coming back off, because usually you cannot fish this back out again. Let's get the... So, let's try this operation again. Again, there's a lot of just tricky things on here. It's not a difficult gun to work on. And here we go. We got the bolt in. The bolt is in the bolt. And that you want to tighten down, because that's your cocking lever and everything. Now, you cock the gun. The gun is cocked. Load your pellet. Close. Pull the trigger. Boom. And that's all there is to it. I'm going to replace this just to keep the dust out. I don't like putting that down because it puts a little bit too much pressure down on the bolt. It makes it very difficult to reload it. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to do that one more time, and we're going to put our single shot tray in, which I prefer. And that's all there is to that. So now all the mechanics, transfer port, valve, everything is in this gun. Now what we're going to do is we're going to install this regulator. What I've already done with the gauge, as you can see, is I put some Teflon tape on it, which is a good thing to do. The regulator O-ring at the bottom is a new O-ring, which bears on that flat surface. So when this is cranked down, hand tight, as you've seen when I took it apart, it was just hand tight. It should seal this. It might need a little bit extra than hand tight, but not a lot. Now, as you see on the adjustment of the lane regulator, he's got a red mark where they line up. That is for 1375 psi. Now, the lane regulators, one of the reasons why I do like the lane regulator is if I can find it, comes in a nice pack. Here's another regulator I have not installed in another gun yet. It comes with a rebuilding kit, extra O-rings inside of it. It gives you all the instructions, not visible to the outside, but if anyone needs the instructions, you can email me and I can send these to you. It's not a big deal with the instructions. What I do like is if you have a different application for this valve, you want higher power, he makes a total rebuilding kit and refurbishing kit where you can change this to basically whatever you want. He's got all different Bellevue washers in here, and he explains on his website how to rebuild this so you can get a lot more power than just 1375 out of it. This is a good kit to have. I got one of these for each one of these regulators in case I do decide to do something with them in the future. Okay, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to go and we're going to take a quick break, and I'm going to go get a special tool I made that's going to go onto this part of the regulator. So when we install this regulator, I will be able to just take this end cap off, adjust the regulator, and put this end cap back on at the range. I won't have to take the gauge block out, pull the regulator out, mess with it, put it back in, change the O-rings probably, and I don't want to go through all of that trouble in order to do that. So I'm going to take a quick break right now, and we're going to, okay guys, this is just a quick tool I made, and what we're going to do is we're going to actually put this through the little piece of the regulator, just like that, and we're going to leave it inside the tube. And what that'll allow me to do is it'll allow me to grab the handle end and twist this to adjust this to whatever pressure that I need it to be. So that's how that's going to work. So what we're going to do now is we're going to turn this upside down. And I wish I had some kind of a simple vise or something to hold this up. This is going to be a little tricky. So what we're going to do is we're going to slowly slide this regulator in where the gauge port is up to line up with this. And we're just going to get this started. Nice and easy. Past these threads. As I said, the threads are a little sharp, but these have been okay. That's the O-ring meshing into the tube. So once we get past that point, that was a little tough going in, but with a little, I didn't want to show all the cursing on camera, so we did not. Now what we're going to do with this is, scoot this over a little bit with a nice rounded off, and just turn the regulator until it lines up with the hole, and now we can screw our gauge in. And again, you want to do this by hand, and maybe just take something such as this and just a little, it's all you need. That'll seal. That won't be a problem. So now that we've gotten that far, now the next order of business is what we're going to do is we're going to put the barrel band back on the gun along with this. This O-ring I have deemed it is not a happy one, so we're going to get rid of that as it shoots into oblivion. I'm going to replace it with a brand new one. I have a ton of these. I always have O-rings from Marauder in my kit, so I always have O-rings for everything. Everywhere I go, everything I do, I always have O-rings. I've saved other competitors and other guys in binds and pinches, and that's what we all do in Field Target. We all help each other, and yet we compete very voraciously against each other. But that's what makes part of the sport. So put a cap on this, and what we're going to do is we're slowly, like I said, these threads have the possibility of being a little bit on the sharp side. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this and just nice and easy. And what we want to do is just screw this in by hand. And I have it out. I have a socket wrench here all set to tighten this down. Now this does not have to be tight. This will seal on its own right now. You don't even have to sink this in. It should seal itself. It does not depend on the threads to seal it. So we're going to just give that a little keep that in, and that's all there is to it. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to take the barrel band with my homemade bush and put our Foster fitting on, cap, and that is all there is to the assembly of a Marauder. It's a little tricky, but it's nothing really difficult that anyone can't handle. There's, like I said, it's just a finesse thing you have to have. Okay guys, that's all it is to putting together a Marauder. Again, a lot of it, some of it's a little bit tricky, but it's not difficult to do. You just have to be careful going past a lot of the threads with the O-rings and the open ports that you have in the air tube. What we're going to do is we're going to try this at the range, and we're going to be right back, and we're going to do a little bit of range testing and see what happens. See how my rebuild works, see what kind of power and velocity we're getting out of it, and we'll go from there. So let's go to the range. As you can see, as I scroll around here, we are at my home range on Long Island. I have a whole bunch of targets set out up front, and we are going to do some group testing with my Marauder that I just rebuilt. I got the thing up and operational. I had to adjust the regulator actually lower. It seems to be I'm getting a really good shot count out of it. I had to put in a lighter hammer spring due to the fact that the original factory spring that I installed at the workbench, when the gun was all together and I tried to fill it, the spring was too strong. It was actually holding a very light spring hill valve open at rest. So we had to pull that spring out and put a smaller, lighter spring in it, which is working very well right now. I have the gun shooting at 12 foot-pounds. It does not like sniper mediums, the 8.5s that this gun did like with the other barrel. Can't have everything all the time. It seems to be shooting JSB Expresses unsorted from the tin rather well. I'm not expecting a whole lot of it, a whole lot from the gun right now, only because parts need to settle in, they gotta wear a little bit, and you know, it's a new barrel, it's a new valve, they need to be broken in a little bit. So until I get a couple hundred shots through it, I'm really not going to be too concerned. At the moment, it's shooting rather well, so that's a good sign. It can only get better in tighter groups as we go. So I'm going to shoot this a little bit more, and we're going to show you some groups at 30, which is my zero distance, and then we'll reach out to 55. We got a little bit of a brisk wind here, not too bad, okay for sighting in, and we'll see what we can do with some distance. Okay guys, I'm shooting at 40 yards here. I'm relatively impressed with the accuracy that these do have. Everything's shooting fine right now, and in a little while I'm going to put the camera down at 55 yards once I get zeroed, and we'll be able to have a close-up on some of my shots that I'm going to be doing at 55. Goes to show that if your gun is inaccurate, change ammunitions. It didn't like the sniper mediums at all. It did not like JSB 8.4s or the Air Arms 8.4s. The JSB Express 7.9 grains is shooting lights out in this thing right now. So those guys that, you know, you see posted on forums a lot, oh, my gun's not shooting right, just change your ammunition, just try it. You might have to go through a dozen different kinds and weights and styles of ammunition until you find something that works. I was hoping that the sniper mediums would have worked in this. They work in the other barrel that I had on it, but I'm relatively pleased with the way the gun's shooting and with the quality of these pellets. And these are unsorted, by the way. So when I get home and I sort these out, and we might eliminate a few flyers, they'll even be better once the gun settles in even more, and I have a better batch of pellets. So that's our update for the moment, and we'll be back in a little bit. Okay guys, I got about 102, 105 shots out of this thing, and I'm going to fill this thing up, and we're going to see what our pressure is. Now keep in mind that this regulator, when I put it in this gun from the factory, was 1375 psi. I had to lower that considerably in order to get 12 foot-pounds out of this. So I'm probably willing to bet that it's still well above 1375, and I still have a lot of shots left in it. So I'm going to fill this up, and I'll let you guys in on it and see what we have as far as air consumption is concerned. Okay guys, just put some air in this thing, and I shot 105 shots, and on a 3000 psi fill, I was only down to 2100 pounds. So I'm probably going to be getting a good 150 shots out of this at 12 foot-pounds. Now that's shooting a 7.9 JSB Express at around 820 feet per second. The gun isn't wasting air. You can hear it. It doesn't go blap the way it used to. So I think the components I got from Mr. Tim Hill and the parts I got from Crosman, in conjunction with those, I think they're working very well. We're going to, now that I filled this gun up, we're going to sight this thing in at 55, my last long distance, and we'll see what we can do with it. And what I'll do is, after I have it sighted in at 55, I'll put the camera down there on a little tiny spinner that I have to show the accuracy that this thing has at that distance. So hold on and we'll sight this thing in. Okay, here we are at the 55-yard mark, and I'm going to take my camera here and put it on the ground, and we're going to shoot my little rat here. So we're going to put the camera right next to it. We are going to plink away. So here we go. And that is what I consider animal abuse. Anyway, guys, the gun is still settling in a little bit, but as you can see, at 55 yards, at this, in a brisk wind, it didn't do too bad. So we're going to wait till it settles in a little bit more. We're going to get another couple hundred shots through it, and we're going to keep you posted. Okay, guys, we just got off the range. Things were a bit promising. Turns out that I switched back to the sniper mediums towards the end of the day, and they kind of worked not too bad. So we're going to have to try some different ammunitions yet through the gun. The only ammunition I haven't tried yet actually was a Crosman ammunition. So we're going to try some Premier Lights the next time we go to the range and see how they work in that barrel. These barrels were designed around that. I apologize for the camera shaking. I'm just holding it because I didn't want to do the whole mount setup. But in going to the range, I had to change the hammer spring to a shorter, lighter one because the hill spring was still too heavy compared to the original Crosman spring. So the Crosman spring didn't work and the hill spring didn't work because they actually held the valve open at rest. So I put a lighter, shorter spring in it that had no preload on the valve at all, so it allowed me to actually fill the gun. I was beginning to fill the gun up, and we ended up actually wasting a little bit of air because it was holding the valve open and not allowing the gun to pressurize. So once I did that, the gun was able to be pressurized, and I shot with it. Like I said, the regulator was set from the factory at 1375, and I was rather impressed. I had to lower it considerably in order to get my speed. I had to lower it from I was getting around about 870, 890 feet per second out of it. So I lowered it probably about a half a turn or so. So if I had to guess, I'm probably somewhere around the 1100 psi mark with that regulator right now. As I said, at the range, I was rather impressed with the shot count. I did 105 shots on only 900 psi, going from 3000 to 2100. But that being said, we have a little bit more testing to do, but it's looking promising. Today was a little windy, so it wasn't too good for sighting in and zeroing, but that's to be expected every once in a while. But guys, hope you guys enjoyed this. But guys, I hope you enjoyed this. Like, subscribe down below. I'm approaching 7,000 views between all my videos. Very, very surprised and very gracious that you guys are interested in this stuff. So that's why I do this, so it can help the guys out that normally wouldn't be doing this on their own, and show you how easy it actually is. If you're just careful with it, it's not a difficult gun to service. So again, like, subscribe down below. I just want to thank everyone that was that got parts to me possible. Mr. Tim Hill and Mr. Mark DeBoard from Crosman getting me my parts that I desperately needed for this rebuild. Like, subscribe down below. This is Field Target Tech, and I'm Tom Holland.